organic. This could be anything. Okay? And by all means, thank you so much, Ewan. Let me know where you guys are from. I'm actually broadcasting from Denver. I actually got, I don't know, about 6 inches of snow last night. Just kind of wondering where you guys are from, because I'm always curious about that. So, music could be a tad louder. Yeah, I can up the music, but really it's about you guys and just being able to hear me okay. So that's why I have 2. Cool. All right, let's get this party started. I want to make sure that music is not distracting. But this is what I want to make, and I want to make something obviously organic, right? So this is what I'd want to do. So what would you do? You'd grab the pen tool, and you'd start to like outline this, and I'll just do this roughly. You guys kind of get the idea. I actually already have it outlined, so let's not freak out, right? I'm not going to spend the whole time outlining this. But here is essentially sort of the shape that I'd want to make at the color that I'd want to add. So what you do here is you would add, maybe add a gradient. Okay, so you can open up the gradient panel. Let's change it to radial. There's our radial gradient, and obviously we would want to change that color. So this is where you'd actually begin when you're sort of creating something like this. And I can move this, by the way, so I can say move it over here or move it in its entirety. So let's just grab that. There we go. Kind of move that up there and adjust it accordingly. Do something like that, right? Hello from Dublin, Fival. Good to see ya. Nick, what's up? Sydney, Australia, in the house. Andrew, thank you for joining us. Keep the comments coming in terms of or questions as well. Aixa from Spain. Awesome. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Yeah. Clemson, South Carolina. Josh. I'm going to be there actually in a couple months. So essentially this is your gradient tool. So I've just selected the gradient tool. That's actually what I'm using. And I can start to adjust this, adjust the size as big as it is, maybe stretch it out to sort of get like a pepper, sort of this angle, right? So let's actually adjust this a little more. Rotate it, right? You get the idea. Okay. All right, cool. Alan's from Scotland. Scottish accent has to be one of the coolest accents. So this already isn't bad, right? And this is what you do as a designer, is potentially start out this way, right? And then you'd add other gradients too. So I can add another one right here, okay? But you're going to notice you're going to hit some limitations with the gradient tool, okay? Even as I start to change the opacity, right? I might want to drop this in, oops, over here or something, right? So I can kind of get some things, but really it's nowhere near that realistic pepper that I have a second ago. It's not bad though. Okay, Algeria is in the house. Well, we can begin. Algeria is here. Good to have you here, buddy. Hungary checking in. Awesome. Good to have you here. Right? So this is what we do. And actually this doesn't look bad. I'm kind of getting this somewhat squared away. But obviously, even though the gradient tool is cool, the only capabilities I have are linear and radial, and then adjusting that accordingly, okay? Rebecca, hopefully you know what I'm talking about, from Puerto Rico. Mohammed from Egypt, awesome. So again, this is super easy, and I'm glad we've updated this and have this sort of control when we're, dealing with gradients, okay? This is all pretty straightforward, and you guys kind of understand this, but I don't want to overlook it, okay? But I can only have one gradient per shape, okay? And what if I do want to deal with something more complex? And that's where I'm at right now. All right, so, yeah, it is a sad pepper. Yeah, let's fix this sad pepper, shall we? All right, so this is the first thing I would do, actually, is I would sort of create an outline of the shape that I want, okay? And this is what I have, right? You can even make it red, all right? All right, so this is the shape that I want, okay? So rather than adding a gradient in here like I was doing before, what I want to do is I'm going to use the mesh tool. The mesh tool is right over here. I'm going to try to zoom in on that. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. The mesh tool, it looks like you're actually manipulating all the various Bezier and vector points, but really that's not the case. It has nothing to do with that and everything to do with color. Notice how it's right next to the gradient tool. So the mesh tool is what I want to use, okay? Okay, so now what I can do is I can click anywhere in this shape. So right here, in fact, I can turn that off. There's my pepper. I want maybe a highlight right up here. I can click right there and it will add this mesh, okay, and those cross points. And it's effectively saying, hey, you know what? I can add a new color here. I'm like, fantastic. Make that white. Hello, white. Right? Let's put another one over here. Click. Oh, let's make that red, okay? Let's just add a couple more of these points. Maybe one down here. Right? And this one will be a little lighter, something like that, or maybe even a little darker. But that's what I'm doing, is I'm changing the color, obviously, of those points, right? You guys see how that's working? I can get some splashback from the table, because technically that's what would happen in real life. It wouldn't be nearly that strong, though, right? But that's how you work with the gradient tool. Excuse me, the mesh tool. I'm going to start to adjust some of these points, right? Because say, for instance, for this highlight's huge, right? I might want to change that. Well, notice how I can manipulate the various Bezier points for this gradient, and I can make it a little less, right? And notice how that's the point that it actually attaches to. So it's a matter of sort of changing that one as well. Okay, for something like this, I might want to add, say, another mesh point right there, and then give it a different color to make sure sort of it has that sort of striped look, something like that. So this shape right here is just not possible with the gradient tool. Okay? Right? So they're just not possible, and it's all done with the mesh tool, right? See what it does there? Maybe I don't want it to go down that far. I can select this one right down here and say, hey, you know what? Make that one darker right down there. That doesn't look that good. Or maybe the one next to it, let's make that one darker, okay? The key thing with the mesh tool is obviously you're adding these various gradients, but just make sure your shape is fairly simple. So I actually did a pretty good job of outlining it, but what I have here is, you know, obviously if it's really complex, you're going to have these really weird connections, and you might just need to go in and clean up that. So I can bring that down, and this one might need to be a highlight, just a softer highlight like that. What about this one? Let's make that one darker like that, and adjust that Bezier point so it goes down just like that. So you can see how it starts to look like it's indented right there. Okay, you can always Command H to hide, right? And I can start to see what this looks like. Let's actually let's make this look a lot better. That's really the idea. Yeah, so it's huge. I'm glad you find it useful. That's what I would do here, is jump in, select the mesh tool, click on that point. Again, this one is so strong. Do I want to make it a little lighter? Okay, so that's what I'll do right in here, is just make it not so strong, but make sure it has that point. Even this point right here, let's just ease that in and give that a nice sort of gradient there. Even down here for this lower part, okay, just selecting that gradient point right there, boom, making it darker, okay? You guys can see what I'm doing, even adding another one if I want to at any time, and making that darker like that. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. Command H to hide. Right, you can start to see what this shape looks like. Still needs a lot of work, right? I get it. We're all friends here, right? I need to add maybe another stripe on the side like that. So that's what I'm doing, okay? Now, let's take a look at this. For these strong highlights right here, do I want to really add that with the gradient, with a mesh? Well, probably not, actually. I actually want to bring back my highlights, right, that I made earlier. So here's my highlights that I made earlier. Let's just bring those into place, like right here. And let's rotate. I can rotate this entire shape if I want to. I can shrink it down. But obviously, that's what I want to do here, is just use a combination of the gradient tool with those gradient shapes in there, as well as the mesh tool off to the side there. Okay, so let's just increase this and adjust it. Kind of like that. Cool. Let's get rid of that, copy paste, move this over just like this. All right, so I'm kind of creating this pepper, but I still want to get into more fine-tuning this as well. Keeping an eye for questions. Summer, good to have you here. Luke. Oh yeah, and you can add, exactly. So Luke, great point. You can add a blur, okay? You can add an effect blur. So this is where I do that. And right now, what are we talking about? We're talking about the sort of the third option for shading, right? So I have, obviously, gradients, mesh, and let's do exactly what you're talking about. Because where would I use that? I would actually use that right here on this edge. Okay, so I'd actually create sort of this edge right here. Something like that. Let's do something like that. I'd create this edge right here. So hopefully you can see this, and that's a great idea. Right here, boom. Let's increase the size of that, right? So there is my, maybe I want to make this highlight, right? This light's bouncing off of this side. Let me just turn down the music a touch. And I want to use the width tool, excuse me, right here, width tool. And I want to adjust the thick and thinness of this. So I want to make it thin right there, and maybe it's going to be like a little thicker right there, and it's going to be thinner right here, right? Thicker over here, thinner over here, down on this end, okay? So I'm just creating the shape that I want, and so I think it was Tim that just said, you know, using sort of blur. So effect, blur, actually let's just do blur, type that in, blur, because there's a couple of them. Gaussian blur is what I can use. Preview it and just, you know, give it that sort of nice highlight is one way of doing it. So there's my blur that I'm adding, clicking OK. Let's just bring that down. And obviously I'd actually want to do a couple other things. Not to get too crazy on you, but this would really bother me if this is this way. So let's duplicate this layer. Or I can even take this shape. X. Bup. We talked, well, geez, probably about a month ago that we talked about clipping paths, and that's what I would want to do here for this. See how I'm getting that splash over? It shouldn't spill over like that. So what I can do is I can create this shape as a clipping mask. So make clipping mask. Hold on. Oops. Grab this. Let's grab a simple shape. Like this one. Here we go. Maybe not that one. Let me just make a simple shape. So for this shape right here, what I want to do is create something else. Let's just draw this out really fast along the same edge. Clipping mask, right? Let's just make it a different color. So I want this to mask out the edge of this. I can just bring that over here. I could select both of those, make clipping mask, and it made that clipping mask, and I can move that into place, right? So that's how you can kind of do that edge, right? So Devin asks about pros and cons for legacy save as formats. Yeah, you're exactly right. I do the same thing with Cinema 4D. I have to sort of back save it when I save this as something else, right? It will tell you, obviously, if I go into CS4, it gives you some of the issues that might happen if you back save it. First off, you don't need to. It's only other software that's going to restrict you from sort of using the latest version. So that's what happens with C4D. But anyways, no big deal. It'll give you those warnings down there. Always save in the latest format. Click OK. Done. All right. Okay, so we have that edge. Yeah, guys, what else do you guys want to work on? I kind of want to cover this a little better, but already this is looking 100 times better than what it was before. So remember how we started was like this, and now we're at something like this, right? So hopefully this is pretty practical. This is Illustrator, so we're doing an illustration. I will say when you're using the gradient mesh, you want to use it anytime you're doing something organic. So even if I wanted a backdrop, let's just create a backdrop back here. Let's do, let's just turn on some things. I was working on the stem too. But say for instance, if I wanted some sort of cloth look, again, just using the rectangle tool, happens to be green, sure. Going in here, mesh tool, and then clicking, and I can always change the color. So let's just change that to white. Let's click again. Let's change it to that green, right? So now I'm just kind of creating this cloth-like fabric that you'll see, and I can adjust any one of these points at any time. Okay, so let's take that down. Let's make sure this one's white. Something like that, but now I can start to bend these any way I want, and you can see that it does the obvious. Okay, this works just like anything else. If I, take this, any of these points, I can move them just like any other Bezier point, as I'm doing now. Oops. Notice if I hit delete, it'll actually delete that whole Bezier point from here to here, from edge to edge. I might not necessarily always want that, but just be aware sort of deleting works as well. For this inside part, we can make that a little darker. You guys get the idea. I'm not actually crazy about this white. It's a little bright. Excuse my color selection, but this is, yeah, it's not bad. All right, let's take a look at, even in this case, right up here, what about this stem? Same thing, selecting it. Let's bring it down here. Now let's just keep it at the top. But same thing for this shape. Watch this, gradient tool, selecting it, zooming in, right? If I click in the center, it's going to connect sort of a straight line is what it's going to do. It's going to do its best job to create that straight line. I might need to move it. Okay, so essentially sort of grabbing that might get kind of tricky. That's why sort of creating a basic shape is really important when it comes to, working with meshes. And what I've done before is I've actually created a shape, and the shape might exist underneath, and then the gradient is on top. But that's all I'm doing is sort of adding a couple of these points. And from here, let's just give this a nice striped look. Another good idea, by the way, since I'm basically selecting what's underneath, I want to hit those same colors. What I can do is I can actually, again, just hold down the command key, click, and it will just turn that into outline mode. Now I can hit I for eyedropper, and then I can select that green that I want. And I can always save that green too. Okay, so I can actually save a couple of these greens. They're right in there, and use those as a basis for my mesh. So let's turn that back on, command click, boom, and now I can actually select and use a different color because I think this one was ridiculous. In fact, let's turn all of that green. All right, sorry, I'm kind of ignoring the chat, and I don't mean to. Sorry, guys. That's what happens when you're trying to like work on something. Bup. Bup. Make this darker. Something like that. Right. All right, that's the beginning of it. Cool. All right, so honestly, for something like this, for the stem, I could use the gradient mesh tool, right, to kind of create that. Another thing to do, if you do ever want a gradient, let's not forget I can sort of create a gradient like I'm doing right now, really fast. And again, we're talking about shading methods, so this is why this is important. Let's change this. Add white. Pick that color. Pick this color. Right, okay, so there we have it. Not bad. All right. You guys still want to be impressed, huh? You want to see some cool stuff still? So do I. I want to make cool stuff. There's our gradient. Well, I can duplicate this. I can take these two, and I've shown this plenty before. Right in here, I can use the blend tool. So double clicking on the blend tool, it's going to hopefully make smooth color, but I'm going to click on this shape and then click on this shape, and it will give me all those in between sort of this shading gradient. But all I need to do is increase the blend. So I'm going to go into the blend options, preview this bad boy. Let's give this like 80 steps, something like that. Okay. So this might work for a stem as well. So this is what I have now. If I double click on that, I have access to that path. So right in here, I can see it right there. I can change that to a curved sort of anchor point like that. And now I have something that might look more like a stem in this case. But the nice thing about this is I have like full control over how that curves, right? I can even make, for instance, one end smaller if I want to, or larger. You get the idea. And maybe that's what I want to do in this case, just like that. So again, notice the number of steps. Again, I start to see them there. I can always double click on the blend tool, change this to 180 instead of just 80. And that's much smoother. And that's another way to just kind of create some, say for instance, a stem in this case, the way I want it to. All right, cool. All right, easy enough. I could show you actually another example that I've made. Please, nobody get offended by this, because shading is huge. I would open up this file, but it's really large. There we go. Here's just like another example of shading as well. So this here, again, done in Illustrator, right? All of these are various gradients. And then down here at the bottom, this is where I've actually used the mesh tool. So again, it works great for things that have sort of an organic look. I would try to open that up, but it's, ooh, actually no, this one, no, it's an old one. I don't know why it's so large. It's 781 megabytes. All right, cool. So again, there's our pepper. I can actually move that over. I can make that something else. I can even switch to the final, you know, that I worked on, and you can start to see again all these different mesh points. Okay, so you can see right here, same thing. As I select any one of these points, see how this one's just a touch lighter, okay? That's all it is. It's just a touch lighter than the others, right? So I'll click off of that. That's all it is, just adding that little splash right there, okay? See, look at this side. In fact, if I, again, just select the gradient mesh, and if you just keep in mind the color that is selected, it's just this nice darker red all the way down. Okay, I want to add more of a highlight right up here. I can do that as well just as easily, just a little, you know, just a little highlight, something like that. Okay, again, this is just a more subtle example, and you can see obviously what's going on there. Okay, for any number of these, it makes it super easy. Right? You guys have any questions? Because again, this is super powerful, being able to do this, right? And this pretty much covers everything I talked about. Here's again just another gradient mesh right in here dealing with this stem, right? And there's some more going on there, okay? Yeah, so pretty powerful. You guys are awfully quiet in the chat. How was your New Year's, huh? Did you guys have a happy New Year? Did ya? Let me refresh my page. So that is, again, shading methods. It's how you create this cool look that, again, is more organic and just works out a lot better rather than adding a bunch of radial gradients would be the other way of doing things. So, cool. Yeah, oh yeah, Evika, you mentioned using the eyedropper to select the color from the real pick. Yeah, exactly right. Just hit I. I think that's what I did earlier, but I was also using the color picker on the side. Yes, Alan, so very, very smart, man. So you might avoid gradients because you could sometimes see that hard edge, and you're exactly right. That's kind of what happens sometime as you add a gradient. You obviously might see, you know, that edge. No matter what you do, keep in mind when you are using gradients, even if you drop the opacity down to 0, it actually blends from white to black. So that's why you get that gray in there. So you always want to make sure that you change not only the opacity to 0, but the color to the actual original color. And again, what Alan's talking about is when you start to drop this in, you might actually see that edge. This is pretty good, but if this is any larger, you might actually be able to see that edge right in there. So again, that's all pretty straightforward. Obviously, I'm kind of old school using the gradient right here. If I use the gradient tool and select it, I can add as many color stops and changes that I want. I can always adjust this. Just want to make sure that goes in like that, and I can add that highlight. All right, cool. Easy enough. Oh, yeah. Last thing. One more thing. What is this about to do? Go to appearance. I can go into appearance, and maybe we will notice it more if I change the color to something else. But another way to sort of add some nice blending is to use different color modes. So with this layer selected, if I go into opacity, right in here, I can change this to overlay. All right, and now when I move this around, you should be able to see it, but this is actually just using that layer mode overlay or darken. Again, not seeing a whole lot there. Luminosity is going to be just like white. Overlay usually gives me a little better results, and again, if this was a different gradient, you'd be able to see this a little better, but this helps kind of blend or brighten up things. See what it's doing? It's kind of brightening up that area. Cool. Splash of yellow or orange. All right, Luis, can we do a tutorial on automatic schedules, swatch, like the swatches library, colors to see how prints all colors palettes? I'm not sure what you're asking there, but yeah, I'd be happy to just submit any tutorial requests just through the comments here. Would be fantastic, right? That would be great. But again, I think the whole gradient mesh is probably the yeah, exactly. So Yana brings up a good point. So obviously, if I go into printing, there might be an issue with some of the blend modes. I can't tell you which ones specifically, but obviously even in here, when I was picking a color, oh, that was CMYK, you might kind of run into some issues that you should be aware of. So it really wasn't, yeah. I should probably remove that. But I could save this out as a PDF for print and see how it changes. This is what I typically do there. Or just try to print it out myself to see the conversion. So good call. Control Y. What is Control Y? Oh, you meant Command Y? So I'm on a Mac. So I think you wanted to basically see an outline preview of this. Let me turn off that text, but there's your outline preview. So you could see, even for something that looks seemingly simple, you get some pretty spectacular results. Again, you can even see this is just one gradient. Works out great for that drop shadow. You know, Command Y again on the Mac, boom, boom, right? Pretty simple. Cool, guys? Cool. Use print mode when you're saving as PDF. You should be good to go there. Fantastic. All right, so there might be some more questions in here. So again, to Marconi, just answer these questions. Marconi, the mesh tool is for creating shading, not for manipulating Bezier like curves and stuff. And that's the problem, because people think that this mesh tool is for doing that, and it's not. Okay. I will say, if you wanted to distort images, there is actually. Let me actually create something. Make with mesh, there's something called an envelope mesh. So let me just take this text